Okay, so I kind of want to move this YouTube channel into creating more crime kind of talks. So today we're going to talk about the 1970s school bus. So I actually came up on this one on YouTube. I was scrolling through like YouTube shorts and I saw it and it was like read the description. And so in the 1970s, this school bus had gone missing on July 15th, 1976. 16 hours after the bus had went missing, police had found the bus, and when they went inside, everything was kind of laid out normally. Like the coloring books were all open as if the children had just been using them, and some of their lunches were still hot and steaming. The only thing that was amiss or that was weird was the oddly large handprint on the back of the bus. Like, you know those back windows on the bus? That was the only thing that was slightly weird. It was bigger than the bus driver's handprint, and the bus driver would have been at the front anyways. And it's bigger than all the kids because these kids ranged from 5 to 14. Also, I am reading off of a paper here, so that's why I keep looking down. Okay, so now let's go into the specifics. So this happened, sorry if I mispronounce any names of places or people. I'm trying my best here. So this happened in, I think this is pronounced Chowchilla or Chowchilla, California. So 26 children and the bus driver gone. It was found out that 3 men had cornered the bus on a small little like desolate dirt road and had kidnapped them at around 3:45 p.m. Sorry, my bad. I misread that. 3:54 p.m. So the bus was hijacked and then left abandoned in a drainage ditch, but then was later moved to an underground bunker. The kids and the bus driver were held for about 16 hours before they escaped. So, as I mentioned, these kids ranged from 5 to 14, and the bus driver's name was Ed Ray. And he would turn out to be a huge hero in this whole scenario. So, again, they abandoned the bus in a drainage ditch. This was near the town. I think it's a town. I don't know, America, sorry. Near Chowchilla or Chowchilla. The victims were moved into 2 vans, and they were driven in those vans for about 11 hours. And then they were imprisoned, kind of trapped in a truck trailer. Now, I did have to research an image of this, so it's not like a camping trailer as I imagined when I first read this. It's one of those trailers that carries like food. You know those like trailers you see on the highway carrying like Coke, but the small version of that. One of those. Okay? Stick with me here. Now, they were buried in this, and I was like, how are they trapped in a buried? So it was a rock quarry. And so the entire back half and the top half were kind of buried. And so then once the 3 armed men had trapped the kids and the bus driver in this trailer, they had covered the rest in dirt. So again, they kind of buried it fully, kind of. The kids, which was actually led by Ed Ray, which is the bus driver, and 2 of the older boys, they helped pry off the door, and then Ed Ray led all the kids to dig themselves out and actually free themselves. So after this, of course, they went and they told the police. There was minimal to no injuries. The kids had a few bruises and scrapes, and of course, they were traumatized, but other than that, they were physically fine. Hypothetically, Ed Ray would have been the most injured, but I couldn't find any definite information about that. The 3 perpetrators were, again, sorry if I say these wrong, Frederick Woods IV, James, I'm gonna mess this up so bad. I think it's Schoenfeld or Schonfeld, I'm not sure, and then Richard Schonfeld. Now, the 3 perpetrators were found captured, and convicted, and then they're sentenced to life in prison. Now, this all happened in 1976, and I couldn't find a definite age for these guys. I'm not sure if that was released to the public. So, I don't know if they would be alive. I don't think so. Probably not. Anyways, so this was something I kind of found funny, kind of really sad. So in the aftermath, the Los Angeles organization took all the kids to Disneyland in effort to help them recover. Guys, these 26 kids were just kidnapped, buried alive, and escaped. And you took them to Disneyland. Like, guys, that's a little much, okay? So it was, these are like, this is the aftermath of like doctors and psychologists kind of doing these tests or interviews with these kids. So it was reported that 23 of the 26 kids suffered from extreme nightmares right after and continuing on through like the 4 to 5 years after these events. So 18 months after all this happened, one of the older boys, assuming this is one of the older boys who kind of helped them all escape, one of the older boys shot a BB gun at a driver of an unknown parked car near his house. Why is not disclosed to the public? If I were to guess, it was probably maybe the guy looked like one of the kidnappers. I have no other reason to try and guess why he would do this. So again, I said 23 of the 26 kids had extensive nightmares right after and long after these events. Most of these nightmares consisted of dreaming of their own deaths. These kids would say that they imagined that they were all lined up and shot one by one. And that is just horrific and really, really sad to hear that these kids had to like imagine that might happen to them while they were trapped. And then to dream of that after is absolutely terrible. But back in 1976, they hadn't yet like named per se PTSD, post-traumatic disorder. They hadn't really named that, and it was kind of a thing, but they didn't know kids could be traumatized to this extent. And they thought only adults could be traumatized to this extent, so they didn't think that these kids were actually traumatized. Sorry, I lost my paper there. Sorry, where was I? Oh yes, the post-traumatic disorder. So these psychologists and doctors just assumed that these kids were just scared and they were just having like normal child nightmares. They didn't actually realize until much later on that these kids were traumatized and that kids could get traumatized more and the same as adults could get traumatized. And when I read that, I was like, guys, what? Kids are more susceptible to getting traumatized because their brains aren't fully developed yet. So I found that kind of crazy to read. So I read on, and turns out one of these kids, it didn't specify whether it was a boy or a girl, it just said one of the kids. When they were 18, they turned to drugs and like drinking, like excessive drugs, excessive drinking to try and cope with their traumatization. Because, again, the therapists, the doctors, the psychologists, psychology and therapists are the same thing, sorry. They just assumed, oh, these kids are just having nightmares. So they didn't get the help they needed. And you're like, but these kids went to school. Wouldn't the school help them? Back in 1976, the schools didn't have people who could help these kids get through this. And I was kind of shocked by that. So, and this 18-year-old that we're talking about, this was about roughly 5 years after the incident. So, like, they were still obviously struggling a lot with this entire thing. And honestly, I am just kind of shocked, kind of horrified that this entire thing happened. But honestly, that bus driver, thank God he was there. Because that bus driver basically saved everybody's lives, and those two older boys helped him do it. Yeah. Honestly, who knows what would have happened to those kids if that bus driver hadn't done what he did. So, I'm just condolences to everybody that was involved in this entire situation. I'm so sorry this happened. It was kind of just terrible. Like, this shouldn't happen to anybody, any kid, like anybody at all. And these kids, this was when they were just going for like a fun field trip. And that's kind of even more heartbreaking because it's like, I remember when I was that young and I was like, oh, I used to be so excited for field trips. Now, finding this out now is like, these kids were probably just as excited as I used to be for field trips. And their lives were put at risk because they were just having a fun day with their school, which is absolutely insane and heartbreaking to me. So, yep, that is it about the 90s missing school bus. Yeah, I honestly just really sad and sorry to hear this happen to absolutely anybody, but honestly, I hope this will never happen to anybody ever again because it is absolutely terrible. But that is the start of our new series with crime scenarios. Or, sorry, scenarios. Crime scenes that have happened in the past. I hope to move into more present ones, but first I'm going to go into back in the day, more interesting ones from back then. I personally choose ones that I'm interested in, that I've never seen or heard of before, and I've heard of a lot. So if you guys have any ideas, I'd love to hear them in the comments. And yeah, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you guys have a lovely day.